On a serene evening, Paul, a veteran trucker, navigated his rig down the long stretch of highway. His practiced eye soon caught sight of a lone figure by a stalled car, a woman, evidently stranded and out of gas. What began as a simple Good Samaritan act of pulling over to offer assistance was about to take an unforeseen turn. The moment she stepped into the spacious cab of his truck, Paul was thrust into a situation that would leave him utterly staggered. At 45, Paul was a dedicated long-haul trucker. His home, a quiet corner on the outskirts of Pittsburgh, shared with his teenage son. Born into the trucking life, with a father who also commanded the highways, Paul's childhood was steeped in the allure of colossal machinery. Weekends were spent alongside his dad, tinkering with the mighty rig, absorbing lessons about engines, and fueling dreams of an unencumbered existence on the open road. Despite his parents' persistent struggle to make ends meet, they unfailingly ensured Paul never wanted for anything essential. Each day brought new tales from his father. Vivid accounts of distant places, diverse people, and the timeless wisdom that urged him to remain a good person, irrespective of life's winding path. Following high school, Paul's parents, hoping for a less demanding path, encouraged him to pursue a college education, envisioning a life easier than the relentless demands of trucking. Yet, Paul's very essence was infused with diesel in his blood. To honor their wishes, he enrolled in business management, even securing a respectable office position upon graduation. However, 3 years of rigid cubicle confinement and the monotony of staring at spreadsheets confirmed an undeniable truth. Paul had to heed the call of his true passion. He ultimately resigned, embarking on the trucking career that mirrored his father's. When Paul finally confided his decision to his parents, their reaction was not one of anger, but profound pride. They saw a son embracing his authentic calling. His father, in particular, became his guide, assisting him in obtaining his CDL license and imparting every invaluable lesson gleaned from a lifetime spent on the road. Years later, with his father's retirement, a cherished legacy was passed on: his meticulously maintained Peterbilt truck. With the vehicle came a solemn promise from Paul to continue the tradition of helping others, just as his father had faithfully done for 3 decades. Tragically, 5 years prior, Paul's wife had passed away, leaving him to navigate the challenging waters of single parenthood, raising their sons, Tommy and Jack, alone. In this new reality, the expansive trucking community stepped forward, becoming his unofficial extended family, offering invaluable support as he strove to balance the demands of long-haul routes with the responsibilities of a lone parent. Despite the inherent difficulties, Paul remained unwavering in his commitment, ensuring he was present for every significant milestone in his children's lives, often enduring grueling overnight drives just to make it home in time. Life on the open road, however, was far from easy for Paul. On many quiet nights, parked at desolate truck stops, he'd find himself gazing at old family photographs, a persistent question lingering. Was he truly doing right by Tommy? His youngest son, bless his heart, never voiced a complaint, yet Paul keenly observed how other children consistently had both parents at every school event. Fellow truckers at Big Sky Transport, his company, often urged him to consider more local routes, to find routes closer to home. But the truth was, the substantial long-haul pay was precisely what secured Tommy's place in a reputable school district and enabled Jack to attend college. Indeed, the trucking community had organically evolved into their indispensable extended family. There was old Joe at the Route 80 truck stop, who'd graciously allow Tommy to complete his homework in his diner whenever Paul was unexpectedly delayed. Eleanor, the dispatcher, consistently made efforts to route Paul through Pittsburgh for crucial school dates. Even his fellow drivers would readily swap routes, ensuring Paul could make it to Tommy's eagerly anticipated baseball games. It was on such an evening, this particular night, that Paul found himself already 14 hours into his shift, pushing hard to regain lost time after an unforeseen delay back in Ohio. Paul's back ached, and his entire being yearned for the mandatory rest period he was fast approaching. Then, ahead in the fading light, he spotted the telltale shimmer of hazard lights. His first instinct, sharp and pragmatic, was to keep rolling. He was already behind schedule, and corporate had recently tightened the reins on any unnecessary stops. Yet, a voice, deep and resonant, echoed in his mind. His father's. "Never pass someone in trouble, son. The road remembers its own." He watched as a woman waved frantically beside a stranded luxury car. "Everything all right, ma'am?" Paul called out, carefully guiding his massive rig to the shoulder. "Does everything look all right?" The woman snapped back, her voice laced with obvious frustration. But seeing Paul's momentarily surprised expression, her demeanor softened almost instantly. "I'm so sorry," she began, a sigh escaping her lips. "It's just been an absolutely terrible day. And of all the places to run out of gas, it had to be here, in the middle of absolutely nowhere." "No worries at all," Paul replied kindly, a gentle smile touching his lips. "Some days are just like that. I'm Paul. I've got some spare fuel in my truck if you'd like." The woman's gaze lingered, skepticism etched on her face. "You carry spare gas?" she questioned. "More than you'd think," Paul chuckled, his smile widening. "Been helping stranded motorists for 20 years now. It's kind of a family tradition." "I'm Rachel," the woman introduced herself as Paul, moved to retrieve a fuel can from his truck's storage compartment. "I really should have listened when my assistant suggested I take the main highway instead of this shortcut." After providing Rachel with enough fuel to comfortably reach the nearest town, Paul noticed her distinct shiver in the crisp evening chill. "Would you like to warm up in my cab for a few minutes?" he offered, his voice gentle. "I've got coffee in my thermos." Rachel paused, a flicker of hesitation in her eyes, but something in Paul's kind gaze resonated, stirring a faint memory of her own father. "That would be wonderful, actually," she admitted. "I've never actually been inside a big rig before." As Rachel began to hoist herself into the elevated cab, she stopped abruptly, her eyes widening in surprise. The interior was a far cry from her preconceptions of a long-haul truck. One entire side of the cab had been ingeniously transformed into a miniature mobile classroom, complete with a laptop securely mounted on a custom stand, educational posters adorning the walls, and a small whiteboard. Strewn across the passenger seat were homework assignments, each visibly marked with red teacher's comments. Stepping fully inside, Rachel didn't merely observe an educational setup. She recognized the meticulous organization of a father pouring his heart into doing his absolute best. Neatly stacked by subject were sets of handwritten flashcards. A dedicated star chart meticulously tracked Tommy's grades, cleverly plotted against his dad's fluctuating delivery routes. At eye level, a small tablet was mounted, its screen displaying a paused video chat with Tommy, a math problem prominently displayed. "Your son must be very proud of you," Rachel murmured softly, her fingers gently touching one of the flashcards. Paul's eyes, usually steady and clear, misted slightly. "I miss so much," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "Last week was his science fair. I could only watch on video, and the internet connection kept freezing. And, He trailed off, a hint of embarrassment coloring his features as his voice cracked. Rachel noticed a college acceptance letter peeking out from beneath a stack of papers. "Is that Tommy's brother, Jack?" she inquired gently. "Yes," Paul confirmed, a mix of pride and underlying sadness in his tone. "He worked as my co-driver for 2 years, saving up for college. Now he's studying engineering. Says he wants to design better trucks." He paused, a faraway look in his eyes. The road gives, and the road takes away. Rachel remained silent for a long moment, her gaze sweeping across the intimate, revealing scene within the cab. Her gaze then fell upon a photograph tucked into the sun visor, a younger Paul beaming in his college graduation gown, proudly flanked by his parents in front of a truck strikingly similar to the one he now drove. "You know, Paul," Rachel began quietly, reaching for her purse, "I'm actually the CEO of Highland Educational Technologies. We've been developing systems specifically designed to help children whose parents work in transportation stay intimately connected to their education." She produced a business card, then began writing something deliberately on its reverse side. "My father was a merchant marine," she continued, her voice softening. "He missed so much of my childhood trying to provide for our family. When I saw your setup here," she extended what appeared to be a check towards Paul, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. When Rachel revealed her identity, Paul's first reaction was a wave of suspicion. In his decades of trucking, he had learned to be wary of offers that seemed too good to be true. But as she spoke of her father, he saw the same profound pain in her eyes that he himself felt every time he was forced to miss one of Tommy's important events. Paul looked down at the check in his hand, and his fingers began to tremble. "Ma'am, I can't accept this," he stammered. "It's too much." "Please," Rachel interrupted gently, her voice firm yet kind. "Consider it an investment in your mobile classroom. Every child deserves a father who cares this much about their education, and every father deserves the tools to be there for their child, even from the road." Paul attempted to protest further, but Rachel was already gracefully descending from the cab. "Your kindness in helping a stranger showed me you're exactly the kind of person we want to work with," she stated. "Expect a call from my office next week. We'd like to pilot our new parent-child education program with you and Tommy." As Rachel's taillights vanished into the darkness, Paul remained in his cab, clutching the check with trembling hands. In the weeks that followed, Paul's life transformed dramatically. The generous funds allowed him to upgrade his truck with state-of-the-art educational technology. Moreover, Highland's pilot program not only significantly improved Tommy's grades, but also provided invaluable support to dozens of other trucking families, helping them stay connected. The Classroom on Wheels program blossomed, impacting far more than just Paul's life. Within a single year, over 500 trucks were equipped with similar educational setups. Corporate trucking policies began to shift, adapting to accommodate parent-child study times, and truck stops across the nation installed improved Wi-Fi and designated quiet study areas. Tommy's academic performance soared so dramatically that he was offered a scholarship to the very same engineering program as his brother Jack. Today, both brothers are actively engaged in designing the next generation of mobile classrooms, dedicating themselves to ensuring that no driver's child ever has to choose between their parents' profession and their education. Paul still drives his regular routes, but his cab has evolved into a shining model for Highland's Classroom on Wheels program. The walls of his sleeper berth are now adorned with heartfelt thank you letters from drivers' children who graduated with honors, overcoming the unique challenges of having a parent on the road. Every truck stop he visits echoes with stories of how his initial example inspired other truckers to create their own dedicated learning spaces within their cabs. And Tommy, beaming with pride, tells anyone who will listen how his dad taught him the most important lessons of all. How his dad taught him the most important lesson of all. That no matter what job you do, being there for your family is what matters most in the end. Paul's story profoundly illustrates how small, unassuming choices can ultimately lead to something far grander than we could ever anticipate. He didn't offer help-seeking recognition. He simply acted on what felt inherently right in that moment. Yet that single decision ignited a chain of events that transformed countless lives, including his very own. It compels one to reflect. How often do we let opportunities to make a profound difference slip by simply because we're too preoccupied, too distracted, or too enmeshed in our own personal agendas? Sometimes, the most significant opportunities don't arise from a relentless pursuit of success, but from the simple, quiet act of doing the right thing when it truly matters.